Global time. The simultaneity of the temporal city and the interferences with the local space. 0.0. The global virtualization of the social has allowed us to be talking for hours with a friend in Singapore and, at the same time, never having talked to our next door neighbor. 0.0.1. This situation has changed completely the processes which configure any urban system, any city. 0.1. In this global virtualization, real space disappears in favor of a complex system of endless variables only linked through time, the global time. The whole humanity shares the same time. 1.0. For the tribal man, space was an uncontrollable mystery. For the technological man, that place is occupied by time. Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the massage. 1.1. Geographical spaces have been supplanted by cyberspaces. 1.1.1. Geospaces are characterized in distances. Virtual ones in time. 1.1.1.1. Geospaces are configured by spatial architectures. Cyberspaces have been designed by architectures of software and hardware. Ultimately, both have been imagined filled by buildings. 1.1.1.2. The aforementioned is called a philosophical loop. 1.1.2. For now on, we will distinguish between spatial environments and temporal environments. 1.1.2.1. The architect as the master of space. The cyberpunk as the writer of time. 1.2. Spatial environments impose geopolitics. Temporal ones impose chronopolitics. 1.2.1. Geopolitics zones by uses, programs. Chronopolitics zones by times of access, day to day. 1.2*. We do not measure anymore in millimeters, we measure in nanoseconds. 1.2.2. Today, chronopolitics supersedes geopolitics. Chronoecology, chronosexuality, chronopedagogy, chronosociology, chronocity. 1.2.2*. 1 minute into our world. 250 children are born. 113 will be poor and 15 born with a disability. Nike earns $36,505. An employee of a Nike factory in Vietnam earns $0.0014. The United States throw away 54 tons of food. Firefox is downloaded more than 1,700 times. -55757 barrels of oil are consumed in the world. 9 people are infected with AIDS. 107 people are killed. 18 people die of hunger, mostly children and mostly in the southern hemisphere. 1.3. Spatial environments are here and now. Timescapes are wherever but in real time. 1.3.1. Space is in person. Timescapes are encoded. 1.4. Spatial environments are zoned and zonable. Timescapes are instantaneous and synchronized. 1.4.1. Zoning causes stratification that divide time. Instantaneity produces indeterminacy that de-intensify space. 1.5. Spatial environments define frontiers. Timescapes have blurred limits. 1.5.1. Frontiers divides the public from the private and therefore public life from private life. Undefined outlines only concentrates in life. 1.5.2. Frontiers are measurable, usually by distance. Blurrily is livable. 1.6. Space environments are formed by processes of causality. Timescapes by simultaneous multiplicity processes. 1.7. In space environments only happens what can be seen. In timescapes only what can be coded. 1.7.1. Vision only knows what is geographically near. Coding is limited by temporal nearness. 1.8. Space environments are slow. Timescapes are instantaneous. 1.8.1. Slowness is characteristic of sedentarism and therefore is measured by duration. Instantaneity belongs to the nomadic and deals with the now. 2.0. Spatial environments are fundamentally based in a durational time. Timescapes are based on a global time. 2.0 *. Time has never been organized faster than our ability to assimilate it. 2.1. Durational time is based on spatial temporal processes. Global time is defined by the multiplicity of stimuli. 2.1.1. Space temporality marks a space in a time. Here and at this time. Simultaneity is everywhere at the same time. 2.1.1.1. Now here equal nowhere. 2.1.2. Here and now is a solidified experience. Everywhere and every time is a liquid experience. 2.1.3. Solidifications move around Euclidean space. Liquids move around smooth space. 2.2. Durational time is defined by individual times. Global time is defined by real time. 2.2.1. Individual time works in cause and effects contexts. Real time works in contexts of immanence. 2.2.2. Causality develops chains of effects. Immanence deals with real-time data. 2.3. Durational time uses technologies of the cosmos. Global time works with the technology of time. 2.3.1. Cosmos relies on the future. Time relies on the now. 2.3.2. Future works with progress and therefore with surplus. Now tries to reach the instant context. 2.3.3. Surplus is an add-on cyborg. Context is an adapted cyborg. 2.3.4. Add-on is an effort to be better. Adaptation is an effort to be better adapted. 2.4. Durational time is measurable. Global time works with the now and therefore is unmeasurable. 2.4 *. The science of timekeeping is the most developed in the scientific world. 2.4.1. Measures try to standardize. Unmeasurable claims a freedom of choice. 2.4.2. Standardization looks for coordination. Choice allows different speeds. 2.4.3. Coordination produces positions of standby. Differentially produces an instability on steroids. 2.5. Durational time moves around tree structures. Global time moves on Sheffery structures. 2.5.1. Tree structures look to establish stable powers. Shefferys are based on immanent relations. 2.6. Durational time measures time in order to occupy it. Global time occupies time without measuring it. 2.6.1. Duration is the time yet to come. Now is the time that has already come. 2.7. Durational time measures space trips in a distance time. Global time looks at the looping blue marble. 2.8. Global time produces the citizens that produce global time and that constitutes a two-dimensional loop. 3.0. Durational time as related to space defines spatial citizens. Global time as related to radical time define the so-called temporal citizens. 3.1. The spatial citizens is homeostatic. The temporal citizen is entropic. 3.1.1. Homeostatic solidifies wax figures. Entropy produces zombies as humans with capability to change. 3.1.2. Solidification looks to fix and own a specific space. Zombification responds to a nomad state of being. 3.2. The spatial citizen is an arboreal being with its roots in a specific space and time. The temporal citizen is a mutant nomad. 3.2.1. Roots grow as duration goes by and therefore relies on experience. Mutability relies on change. 3.2.2. Experience is acquired when awaken. Change is possible when connected. 3.2.3. Awake works with gravity. Connection with time. 3.3. The spatial citizen looks for a life project. The temporal citizen looks for ad hoc projects. 3.3.1 Life projects need effort. Ad hoc projects need speed. 3.3.2 In order to make an effort you have to be awakened. In order to travel through speed you have to be connected. 4.0 If something defines contemporary cities, it is the intense search on how to live in them. 4.0.1 21st century citizens live in 19th century cities, and that constitutes a paradoxical loop. 4.1 Spatial citizens constitute spatial cities. Temporal citizens constitute temporal cities. 4.2 Spatial cities work with chronopolitics. Temporal cities are imposed by the near future. 4.2 Opening times of schools, universities, shops or business. Time schedules of labor. Distribution and access response to security interventions. Absence of medical care on weekends. Military parades in spring. Old people and dogs abandoned in summer. Touristic cities overload in specific seasons. 4.2.1 Chronopolitics impose a segregated time. Near future claims for a 24-hour city. 4.3 Spatial cities produce no places. Temporal cities produce no times. 4.3.1 No places deny access to a specific space. No times deny access to the global time, access to Wi-Fi. 4.3.1.1 Both impose a control over human experience. 4.3.2 No times are prisons, hospitals, courthouses, councils, war conflicts, refugee camps, underground services, cinemas. 4.3 June, in Grenada, is the first place in the world to claim access to Internet as a human right, and the inaugurated the active teledemocracy. 4.4 Spatial cities look to be fixed to an image, a recognizable icon. Temporal cities try to have as many instantaneous images as possible. 4.4.1 An icon is defined for its capability to become a logo. Instantaneousness is evaluated by its capability to change between logos. 4.5 Spatial cities look for connectivity. Temporal cities look for hyperconnectivity. 4.5.1 Connectivity starts when 2 points are connected. Hyperconnectivity is based on the possibility of connecting infinite points. 4.6 Spatial cities look for progress. Temporal cities look for mutability. 4.6.1 Progress is measured by improvement, its capacity to be better than the previous one. Mutability values, above all, change and its capability to accommodate change. 4.6.2 Progress looks for what was before and what is ahead. Mutability seeks for what is connected and with what is connected. 4.7 Spatial city design responds to functionality. Temporal city design responds to real time. 4.7 Mail versus email. Library versus SCIDrive. Archive versus YouTube. Universities versus MOOCs. Newspapers versus newswebs. Book versus web page. Phone versus smartphone. Analog photos versus digital photos. 4.7.1 Functionality relays in a conception of universality. Real time depends always on the applied context. 4.7.2 Universality seeks for permanence. Context is defined by updating. 4.7.3 Permanence is death. Change is live. M.H. and Hoffmeyer. 4.8 Spatial cities need time for movement. Temporal cities need time for uploading. 4.8.1 Movement increases with the size of the city. Uploading depends on the speed of your connection. 4.9 Spatial cities are defined by spatial goods, services and obligations. Temporal cities are produced by digital and spatial goods, services and obligations. 4.10. Spatial cities build and then introduce life. Temporal cities produce life and then builds accordingly. 4.11. Spatial cities try to teach something. Temporal cities try to learn something. 4.11*. Amongst this lessons, we find those women that dedicate 3 times the time for daily matters, that spend more time to get to the same point than men, that the ratio of men with driver license is bigger in every age sector, or that married women make closer movements from home than single women. 4.11.1. Spatial cities have demonstrated their incapacity to deal with the new context. 4.11.1.1. By bringing us to an ecologic crisis with huge environmental degradation, to a demographic crisis with overpopulation, to a Western crisis with an unsustainable notion of progress, to an urban crisis that is contaminated and contaminator at the same time, to a rural crisis with desertification, to a political crisis with its incapacity to make decisions, to a knowledge crisis that increase fragmentation, and to an ideological crisis where positions are extremely radicalized. 4.10.2. Temporal cities reduce the impact to the environment by increasing the intensification of time over space. 4.11.3. Temporal cities produce an unprecedented critic intensification thanks to activism platforms, acquiring a global reach within your computer and by making possible that every citizen could be a potential activist. 4.11.4. Temporal cities make possible solidarity, separated by charity, by supporting innovative cultural, social, political and ecological initiatives. 4.11.5. Temporal cities make possible the connection between different interests, desires and rarities, undoing solitude and strengthening common forums. 4.11.6. Temporal cities provide a global overview, dismantling myths, contextualizing planetarium similarities and differences and visualizing the decisions made on those. 4.11.7. Temporal cities favor critic positions and its connections. 4.11.8. Temporal cities prime the access to a terminal than the accumulation of goods. 4.11.9. Temporal cities and their activism allows the confrontation without violence. April 11, 10. Temporal cities multiply individual and collective identities by a diversification of its options. April 11, 11. Temporal cities are heteropolis without stable majorities or order, plural contexts where none accumulates power enough time to solidify it. 5.0. Spatial cities are designed by architects. Temporal sites are designed by temporal architects. 5.1. Architecture as a discipline develops the places where human everyday experience happens, where we live and how we live it. It speaks about politics, society and also power, elite communities and neighborhoods, industrial belts, spontaneous neighborhoods, leisure, recreation or residence sectors, dormitory towns, places for voluntary or forced detention, etc. 5.2. If we cling to think that architecture is a tool of society and that the most important concept that defines the social is its level of communication, then, global time is the hypersociety, the temporal citizen its user and the temporal city its context and, therefore, the scope of action for architecture. The problem is that this society is not located anymore in a particular place and does not need for a space theorization. Their lifestyles are no longer associated with a house, a square, a street or a dwelling.